Okay, we are recording. Let us get started. We are on DAF YOMI Aleph. And let me just get our bearings, because we're in the middle of an analysis of a brisa that has three opinions regarding the process of malika, which is the special killing of a sacrificial bird from the nape of the neck, for a special type of oaf, a special type of bird, the olas ha'of, the burnt offering bird. So there are two types of individual bird offerings. One is the chatas ha'of, and one is the olas ha'of. We know that the major difference between the two procedurally for malika is that for the chatas ha'of, you only sever one of the two simanim with your thumbnail. One of the two, is that the word? Orifices, right? The either the trachea or the esophagus. For the olas ha'of, you sever both. The machlokes in the brisa is whether you have to completely sever or you only have to partially sever, just like you do with an animal that is being slaughtered. When you slaughter an animal, you have to sever both simanim, but you just have to sever rov simanim, the majority of the simanim. With an olas ha'of, you have to do the same, but there's a machlokes as to whether you do it just like an animal, which is rov simanim, the majority of the both simanim, or kol ha-simanim, or sever it completely and just leaving the skin that attaches the head to the body intact. So there are three opinions on this matter, which really break down into two. In other words, the opinion of the Tanakama is it requires complete severance, and the other two opinions, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, is you only have to do rov simanim. And the Tanakama's position was based, this is all based on exegesis, about how we understand the psukim that talk about the olas ha'of. The Tanakama had said that what we do say is, the Torah says the word kamishpat, you shall do the law of the olah like the aforementioned law. So which aforementioned law is being referenced? So according to the Tanakama of this brisa that we saw yesterday, it is you shall do it like the korban chatas of a behema, of an animal. And for what purposes is the Torah connecting the two? Not for the purposes of how you're supposed to sever the simanim, but for something totally different, which is for the purposes of telling me that just like the chatas animal must have three characteristics. It has to come from CHULLIN, which means it has to belong to the owner of the korban. It cannot come from meiser sheni. It cannot come from public funds. It has to come from the individual owner. And it has to be slaughtered or killed during the day. And the third similarity is that when the Kohen does the slaughter or the killing, he has to do it with his right hand. All of those three halachos we learn or we apply from chatas behema to an animal sin offering, to the olas ha'of, to the bird burnt offering. So the Gemara is now going to analyze, but as far as the severance of the simanim, we are not analogizing it to the chatas behema. The chatas behema only requires rov simanim, but the severance of the simanim for the olas ha'of, the bird, requires all of the simanim. Now, how does the Tanakama know that? He knows that from the fact that the Torah creates an adjacency between two verbs regarding the olas ha'of, malika and haktara. The Torah says umalak v'hiktir, that he shall do malika and he shall do haktara. Just like the haktara, placing on the mizbeach of the olas ha'of, has to be done with the head and the body separately, so too the malika has to be done such that it is a complete severance to completely separate the head of the bird from the body. Now let's analyze the Tanakama. We're on the fifth line of the DAF YOMI Aleph. Yes.
It says it's completely severed, but the skin is still there, right?
Yeah. So it's a complete severance of the simanim, which is the mainstay of the animal. The skin can remain intact. Okay. Now the Tanakama. The Gemara's question now is on the. It's actually the beginning of the sixth line. V'chi me'achar denafkalan me umolak v'hiktir v'hikrivo lamali. So the Gemara's question is, we had used this word v'hikrivo according to other opinions in the brisa to tell me that the avoda of the olas ha'of was unique and distinct from all other karbanos, right? But if you're already, you could use that to tell you that by the Olas Ha'of you have to do a complete severance of both simanim. But that's not what we're using. We're using it from the adjacency of the two verbs of umalak v'hiktir. So the question is that according to the Tanakama, what does he use the word v'hiktiro for? So ila v'hikrivo hava amina mai kamishpat chatas ha'of v'imi shum umalak v'hiktir hava amina ma haktara barosha shel mizbeach af malika barosha shel mizbeach. So hashta de kosav rachman v'hikrivo derosh be nami ha. Period. So the Gemara's answer is very simple. You need to have both the adjacent verbs of umalak v'hiktir, and you need the word v'hikrivo to teach you that there has to be a complete severance. Because if you would have only had those two adjacent verbs of umalak v'hiktir, I might have thought that it's teaching you a different halacha. That just like the haktara has to be done when the Kohen is standing on the top of the Mizbeach, so too the Malika has to be done when the Kohen is standing on the top of the Mizbeach. That's one way I could have interpreted it. How do I know that it's actually not reflecting on the position of the Kohen, but rather reflecting on the way that you're supposed to kill the bird? From the word v'hikrivo. The word v'hikrivo tells me that the way that you kill the Olas Ha'of bird is unique. How is it unique? In that we connect the Malika to the Haktara, that just like the Haktara has to be done with the body and the head separated, so too the Malika has to accomplish a complete separation of the head from the body. Fine. So now the Gemara says, okay, but let's go back to something that the Tanakama had said. We connect the Olas Ha'of to the Chatas Behema, to the bird burnt offering, to the animal sin offering. And we said that just like the animal sin offering must be the individually owned personal property of the bringer, so too the Olas Ha'of must be the same thing, and it cannot come, let's say, from Meiser Sheni tithes. So Chatas Behema de'ena ba ela min hachulin min olin. So Taka, how do we know that the Chatas Behema has to come from individually owned property? So Amar Rav Chisda do Amar Kra v'hikriv Aharon espar chatas asherlo mishalo v'lo mishel tzibur v'lo mishel meiser. So the Gemara answers because by the Chatas Behema, one of the sin offerings that is an animal is on Yom Kippur brought by the Kohen Gadol. And over there it says that he shall offer the bull sin offering that shall be his. The words asherlo, that shall be his, or that belong to him, teaches me that it cannot be from Meiser Sheni produce purchases or exchanges, nor can it be from communal property. It has to be the personal property of the Kohen Gadol. And that applies to all other Chatas Behemas, and from this extension it applies to the Olas Ha'of as well. So the other two halachos that we used to connect the Olas Ha'of to the Chatas Behema were that the Shechita has to be done during the daytime, just like it is by the Chatas Behema, and that it has to be done by the Kohen's right hand. So the Gemara questions both of those. He says, Biyom, question mark, mi biyom tzavoso nafka, exclamation point. Why do you need to learn that halacha from the Chatas Behema? We have a generic halacha. At the end of the entire description of all of the karbanos, the Torah says, Biyom tzavoso, on the day that God commanded Moshe. And from that word bayom, it teaches us that all karbanos, with all of the avoda of the karbanos, must be done during the day. So you don't need to connect Olas Ha'of to Chatas Behema to teach you that, because you know that generically for all karbanos. So the Gemara answers, Kedi Nasba. You're right, this was mentioned only incidentally, which means the Gemara does that sometimes. It says that this is a halacha that we do know from another source, and the Brisa misrepresented the reality. It's not that we're learning it from this connection, but we wanted to throw in a whole bunch of things to show you that this connection contributes to our understanding of the halacha. We threw this in as well, but it's not to be taken literally. And next, Yado Hayamanis, question mark, Midarabba Bar Bar Chana Nafka, exclamation point. You mean to tell me that we learn from this connection between Olas Ha'of and Chatas Behema that the Kohen must do the killing with the right hand? That's not derived from here. That's derived from Rabba Bar Bar Chana's halacha. Do Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Kol Makom Shenemar Etzba O Kahuna Eina Ela Yamin. That any time the Torah says either the Kohen shall ... or he shall take with his finger ... either language of Etzba or Kohen immediately implies he has to do it with his right hand. So here, by the Olas Ha'of, the word Kohen is mentioned, so doesn't that automatically imply that he has to use his right hand? Why do you need a connection to Chatas Behema to teach you that self-same halacha? So the Gemara answers, V'idach kahuna baya etzba, etzba lo baya kahuna. So the Gemara answers that in itself is a machlokes. According to Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, it's true. Anytime the Torah writes the word Kohen, it implies using his right hand, but that's not universally agreed upon. Everyone agrees that when the Torah writes the word etzba, it means with the finger on the right hand. But there are those who hold that just because the Torah writes the word Kohen, that does not automatically imply the right hand, and you need an explicit pasuk or connection in order to indicate that. And that's what our Tana is holding. Now, the Tanakama v'Reb Elazar b'Reb Shimon mimul ha'oraf minalu. So now the last order of business for the Gemara today is let's review all three opinions. The second of the three opinions in this brisa that we referenced yesterday was Rabbi Yishmael. And Rabbi Yishmael had said that the word kamishpat, which the Tanakama uses for something else, and Rav Shimon ben Elazar uses for something else, the word kamishpat, according to the aforementioned law, teaches me that just like by the chatas ha'of, Malika implies that it has to, the Torah says explicitly by Malika, by the Chatas HaOf, that it has to be done at the nape of the neck, from the back. So too, by the Olas HaOf, where the Torah just says Umalak, but it does not say Mimul or Po from the nape, but it also is implied, Kamishpat teaches me that it also has to be done from the nape. So the question is, if Rabbi Shmuel is using the word Kamishpat to teach me that, and the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar use that word Kamishpat for something else, where do they know? From where do they know that the Olas HaOf has to be from the nape of the neck? So the Gemara answer is Gamri Malika mi Malika. The answer is that they say that the very fact that the Torah uses the self-same verb of umalak, Malika by definition, once the Torah has defined Malika by the Chatas HaOf as from the nape, then that applies to all places where the verb Malika appears, and you don't need to say anything else explicit in order to teach me that it has to be from the nape of the neck. Let's go on to the Mishnah. Now, let's just to get our context. The previous Mishnah had indicated that Malika and Shechita are two totally separate procedures and protocols, and what is kosher for Malika is not kosher for Shechita. What's kosher for Shechita is not kosher for Malika. Now that we're mentioning things that sacrificially are mutually exclusive of each other because they're two different types, we now go to another similar structured Mishnah of two different types which are mutually exclusive of each other. And what is that? Kosher bitorin pasul bivnei Yona, kosher bivnei Yona pasul bitorin. And what the Mishnah tells us is that there are two types of sacrificial birds. One is called a tor, and the other one is called a ben Yona. Now the reason why this gets confusing in the translation is because how does the Torah, where do we find the word Yona being referred to as a bird in the Torah? Parshas Noach. And how do you translate Yona over there?
Dove.
A dove. Right, but they don't translate as dove over here. A tor is really the dove, and a ben Yona is translated mostly as a pigeon. But they're really the same family of bird, and it gets a little confusing. Tor is a turtle dove or just a dove, and a Yona or a ben Yona is a pigeon. So those are the two types of birds that are kosher to be used for an ola or a chatas. But the Mishnah reflects on something quite interesting, that what is kosher for a tor is not kosher for a ben Yona, and what is kosher for a ben Yona is not kosher for a tor. And as we're going to see from the Gemara, what it means is the age of the bird. The reason, note something very curious, is that when the Torah talks about the Yona, it doesn't say Yona, it says ben Yona. Now, like son of Kong, right, which was, or son of Sam, or son of something. What does that mean, son of? Why does it say ben? It's to imply that it has to be youthful. It's a non-mature, an immature bird. So the ben Yona specifically must be immature, and the tor must specifically reach adulthood and is a mature bird. That's the difference between the two, and that's why they're mutually exclusive. If what is kosher for a tor, which is maturity, is pasul by a ben Yona, right? And what is kosher for a ben Yona, which is immaturity, is pasul for a tor. And that leads to the next line in the Mishnah.
What's this age? Is magic number 2?
The Gemara doesn't explain, but the Gemara does say that there is a physical sign of maturity. Tchila satzihuv bazeh ubazeh pasul, which is that when the bird develops a yellow plumage, that is a sign that it is in between youth and old, between young and old, and therefore it's puzzle if it has a yellow plume. As we'll see, the process of maturing is that originally it has no yellow in its feathers at all. So if it has no yellow in its feathers, that's totally immature. If it has a golden plumage, it's fully mature. Yellow plumage implies that in-between phase, where it's already too old to be young, and it's too young to be old. So that's why the Mishnah says that if it has a yellow plume, it can't be used for either for a tor or a ben Yonah. So the Gemara now says, Tanu Rabbanan, Torin Gedolim Kesherim Ketanim Pesulim, B'nei Yonah Ketanim Kesherim Gedolim Pesulim. So the Brisa just really elaborates. For a tor, it has to be, if it's mature, it's kosher. If it's young, it's pasul. And for B'nei Yonah, it's just the opposite. If it's young, it's kosher. If it's gedolim, if it's fully mature, it's pasul. Nimsa kosher b'tor and pasul b'Bnei Yonah, kosher b'Bnei Yonah, pasul b'tor. So it turns out that which is kosher for a tor is pasul for a ben Yonah, and that which is kosher for a ben Yonah is pasul for a tor. So now Tanu Rabbanan, torim gedolim v'lo ketanim. So the Brisa just elaborates, and it says that a tor must specifically be old or mature. It cannot be young. Shiyachol v'alodinu, because you could have made the logical argument to argue opposite that. Uma b'nei Yonah shelo huchsheru b'gedolim huchsheru b'ketanim torim shehuchsheru b'gedolim einodin shehuchsheru b'ketanim. You could have made the following argument. He says, look at the ben Yonah. The Torah says that it's kosher when it's young, and so you could have argued if the Torah says that a ben Yonah is kosher when it's young, even though it doesn't have the and youthfulness is extolled. So surely an animal, a bird, which is kosher when it's old, should surely be kosher when it's young. So you could have made the argument, the logical argument, that if the Torah says that a young ben Yonah is kosher, then surely a young tor is kosher. So therefore, Talmud Omer, torim gedolim v'lo ketanim. And therefore the Torah writes specifically torim, and it's not really clear where you see that from the word, but the Gemara will elaborate, that it must specifically be mature and not young. Now, b'nei Yonah, ketanim v'lo gedolim, sheyachol v'halodin hu ma torim shelo huchshru b'ketanim huchshru b'gedolim, b'nei Yonah shuchshru b'ketanim, enodin shuchshru b'gedolim. So then the Brisa says the exact opposite, that a ben Yonah must specifically be young, because you could have made the logical argument that a tor, which is kosher when it's mature, right, and not kosher, it's kosher when it's mature, so, and it has the advantage of being old already, because in this context you can make the logical argument that age is an advantage, right? So then surely when the Torah says you can use a ben Yonah, which doesn't have the advantage of age, then surely if it's aged, it should surely be kosher.
Even better.
So even better. So therefore, Talmud Omar b'nei Yonah ketanim v'lo gedolim. And therefore the Torah says, no dafka b'nei Yonah. It must be young and it cannot be aged. So my Talmud, so the Gemara says, explain to us where you're seeing in the words of the pasuk that they're mutually exclusive, right? That it's dafka young or dafka old. So really the word ben Yonah implies that a Yonah must specifically be young because it uses the word ben, right? But where do you see it in the opposite direction, that the word Torah means dafka old and not young? So Amar Rava lo lishtamit kra v'lichtov min b'nei haTorah u'min hayonah. So Rava's initial answer is that, well, the very fact that the Torah consistently always calls the Yonah a ben Yonah and always calls the Torah a Torah. So that in itself implies that the ben Yonah dafka has to be young and the Torah has to be old. But the Gemara is not satisfied. But wait a minute. Ema b'nei Yonah dekasabu rachmana b'nei ketanim in gedolim lo. Torim iboi gedolim laisi iboi ketanim laisi. But the Gemara says, but wait a minute. You could still make the argument. Okay, ben Yonah I understand. The Torah dafka wants it to be young. But the word Torah could imply both young and old. How do you know that it only means old? So dumya de b'nei Yonah, ma b'nei Yonah ketanim in gedolim lo, avtarim gedolim in ketanim lo. So the Gemara answers, well, it's based on the fact that the Torah always puts them together. It says ben Yonah and it says Torah. So therefore, we learn from ben Yonah and apply it to Torah. Just like a ben Yonah can only be of one type, it can only be young, so too the Torah can only be of one type, and if it doesn't call it ben, it must be that it must dafka only be old. Tana Rabban. So now we continue with the Brisa. Yachol Yehu kol hatorim v'chol b'nei hayonah kisherim, Talmud lomar min hatorim v'lo kol hatorim, min b'nei hayonah v'lo kol b'nei Yonah, prat l'tchilas hatzihuv shebazeh v'shabazeh shepasel. So the Brisa says, you might think that any ben Yonah is kosher or any tor is kosher. So therefore the Torah says the preposition min hatorim, o min b'nei hayona. The Torah says you can take from, like a subset from the Torim, and a subset from the Bnei Yonah. So what is that coming to exclude? It's coming to exclude when it reaches a certain age, it's not kosher. When the plumage becomes yellow, for either the Tor or the Ben Yonah, it's no longer kosher. So that's the conclusion of the Brisa. Me'emasai hatorim kisherim, or the Brisa actually continues. Me'emasai hatorim kisherim mishiyazivu, me'emasai Bnei Yonah pisulim mishiyazivu. When is a Torah considered to be kosher? When its plumage switches from yellow to gold. That's a more sign of maturity. And when is a ben Yonah pasul? In other words, if it gets too old, when its plumage becomes yellow. But it has to be totally clear of any yellowness in the plume. So Tani Yaakov Korcha me'emasai b'nei Yonah kisherim mishiye'ala'u. So Yaakov Korcha, which is an unusual Tana, we don't find him too often in Shas, he says, what is the minimum age for a ben Yonah? You've told me the maximal age, which is when it develops a yellow plume. What is its youngest stage? So it has to come to the stage of ala'u, which is an unusual verb. So hu tani la v'hu amar la. We have no idea what that verb means. So he taught it, and he said it's based on the following pasuk in Iyov. And by the way, Iyov has the most exotic verbs in all of Tanakh. It says, Efrochav ya'ala udam. So it says in Sefer Iyov, its chicks will be me'ala'a, with blood. So what does that mean? Ema, so from that pasuk you learn the halacha. Amar Abaya mechishamit gadfa minei va'asidama. That if you pluck a feather from it, blood will flow from the pore of the plucked feather. In other words, when a chick is very young, you can pluck out its feathers without any bleeding. But once it reaches a certain level of maturity, the feathers are very deeply embedded in the pores. So by pulling it out, you cause it to bleed. So it has to be old enough so that it starts to bleed when you pluck a feather. If it's younger than that, it's not kosher even for a ben Yonah.
So this verb means to pluck? Ya'u?
Ya'ala'u means to pluck it, yeah.
Okay.
And
Arabic. Well, the way you're saying it sounds Arabic.
well, I just want to emphasize that there's an ayin in there.
Oh, I see.
Ya'ala'u, right? But it's basically, the shorish is ayin lamed ayin.
To go what?
I don't know. We'd have to look in a sefer of shorashim and see where this, if there are other places where it appears. It's a very exotic verb. Boy Rabbi Zera, ha'omer harei alai ola min hatorim o min b'nei hayona ve'evi techilas hatziv shebazeh v'shebazeh mahu. So this is a fascinating question that Rabbi Zera asks. What if a person pledges, I'm going to bring a bird as a sacrifice, I'm going to decide later whether it's going to be a tor or a ben Yonah. And he decides, you know what, I'll just bring two. And he brings two birds, a tor and a ben Yonah, and both of them have a yellow plumage. So the question is, was he yotzei his pledge or not? And this is the question. Mahu. So what do we say? Sefei kahavi v'nafik, o dilma bria havi v'lo nafik. So the question is like this. If you say that yellow plumage is not, in other words, there are two stages of a bird's growth. There's young and there's old. And the yellow plumage is a suffix, whether it's part of the young or whether it's part of the old, and we just don't know. If that's the case, so since he said, I'm going to bring either a tor or a ben Yonah, then one of them surely is the right age, right? Because we're just not sure whether the yellow plumage stage is old or young. So whichever one it is, he's yotzei the bird that's supposed to be in that category. That could be one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that there are three stages of a bird's growth.
Right.
There's young, there's old, and then there's the middle when it has a yellow
both of
plume,
them.
which means that it's not because of a suffix that you can't bring a bird with a yellow plume, but rather because it's neither old nor young. It's a middle stage of growth, and therefore he hasn't fulfilled his pledge at all.
It's vada.
What?
It's vada. It's for sure that
It's for sure that it's neither young nor old. Right, exactly. So what is it? So Amar Rava Tashma. Well, listen to the language of the Brisa. Prat l'tchilas hatziv shebazeh shepasel. Remember, the Brisa had brought a pasuk to tell me from the preposition min that not all ben yonas, and not all Torahs are kosher, because if either one has a yellow plume, it's pasul. And we learn that from a pasuk. Now, iyamart bishlama bria havi shapir, ella iyamart sveika havi itzrich kralamute sveika, question mark. So the Gemara says, if you tell me that it's a suffix, whether when it has a yellow plume, whether it's young or old, why do I need a pasuk to exclude it? A pasuk, it's ontological. Its actual status is either young or old. If it's young and it has to be old, it's not kosher. If it's young if it has to be young and it is young, so then it is kosher. Why do you need a pasuk to exclude something that I cannot bring just because I don't know its status? That you shouldn't need a pasuk for. If you need a pasuk, it's to indicate that there's a middle stage that's definitive, where it's not young and it's not old. So doesn't that prove the point? So the Gemara says not necessarily so. Ki itzterich kra limeute nirva v'ne'evad. No, maybe in reality the brisa is not exact. Really, you don't. I'll argue that even according to the brisa, you don't need a pasuk to exclude the yellow plume. The brisa was only using the pasuk as an asmachta, which means that it's not literally learning it out from the pasuk, but it's using it as a support to a rabbinic law based on suffix. What then, taka, is the pasuk telling me? It's telling me a separate halacha, not having to do with yellow plumes, but rather to exclude other kinds of pasul birds. Maybe it's coming to teach me that I might have thought differently, that birds that have been used for illicit sexual purposes or have been used for avodah zarah, I might have thought that they're kosher, and maybe the preposition min is telling me that no, you cannot use those birds because you can only use a subset of Torim and Bnei Yonah. Because why? Salka daita chamina holu chesiv ki mashchasam ben mumbam v'tana devei Rabbi Shmuel kol makom shnemer hashchasa eno ela devar erva va'avodas kol chavim. I might have thought that the Torah finds a sacrificial animal that has the verb hashchasa attached to it to be halachically invalid. And what does the verb hashchasa refer to? It refers to either illicit sex, sexuality, or avodah zarah. Where do I know that? Devar erva dichsiv ki hishchis kol basaras darko al haaretz avodas kol chavim dichsiv pentash chisun v'as disem lechem pesel. Because the verb hashchasa is used both in the context of sexual immorality, like in Parshas Noach, that everyone corrupted themselves, hishchis, and the word hashchasa is connected to avodah zarah, as it says in the pasuk that when you come into Eretz Yisrael, you may be mashchis and worship avodah zarah. Right? So therefore, kol shahamun poisel bo devar erva avodas kol chavim poslim bo, v'chol sheinamun posel bo ein devar erva avodas kol chavim poslim bo. Now, where is the verb hashchasa used in terms of karbanos? To talk about mumim, to talk about physical blemishes. The Torah says you cannot bring an animal that has a mum because it is hashchasa. It is attached to hashchasa. So I might have thought that only where the Torah invalidates a mum for a korban, it also invalidates that kind of animal if it has been associated with bestiality or avodah zarah, right? But in a situation where the Torah does not invalidate a mum, such as by a bird, by a bird, only if one of its limbs is missing can you not use it as a korban. But if it has a minor mum, you still use it as a korban. So I might have thought that since the Torah associates hashchasa with the mum, and a mum is kosher for a bird, maybe birds used for bestiality and birds used for avodah zarah would still be kosher for a korban. V'hani ofos hovelo pasal b'umuma da'amar mar tamus v'zachrus b'beima vein tamus v'zachrus b'ofos emer devar erva avodas kol chavim nami lo lifsol b'u kamash mulan. So I might have thought that just like by birds, a mum is not a stigma, nor is maleness, its gender a stigma, which is by contrast is the case by animal sacrifices. So I might have thought that just like the Torah permits a blemished bird, it permits a bird that's used for bestiality or avodah zarah to use that bird as well. And that's why the Torah uses the words min hator, min hatorim, o min b'nei hayona. It's coming to teach you that despite the fact that a mum is kosher by a bird, you still cannot use a bird that was used for bestiality or for avodah zarah. And basically the Gemara leaves this issue unresolved. It's unresolved as to whether the yellow plumage is implying a completely separate category of neither young nor old, or whether it's a suffix, whether it's young or old. And therefore our question is, when a person made such a pledge and brought two birds, a tor and a ben yonah, both of which have a yellow plume, it's a suffix whether he's fulfilled his pledge or not, because we don't know. Did he bring two birds that are totally not kosher, or did he bring two birds, one of which is for sure kosher? And so we don't have an answer for that. We'll hold it here for today.
Say that the person who pledged, I'm going to bring as a korban, or just going to bring two birds?